and then to you, Mr. Banerjee, and then to you, Mr. Khan. I hope that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And at least that's for the first round of maybe 5 minutes to 7 minutes each. And then we would probably open it up more like a panel conversation based on what you all say. I would probably ask a few questions. And then we'll take a few questions at the end if there are any questions coming in from the audience.
Yeah.
So, Sumit, we would be able to see the questions on the chat?
Yeah, that would be in the Hive. So we'll track that and it will be shared with you so that you can pick up those questions.
Great.
And Mr. Banerjee, I think you have some slides to share also.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, you'll see a share button at the bottom. So once you open the slides in the computer, then you share that, and it will come on the screen, and then you make it a full screen. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll do that. Yeah, give it some time.
Okay. Thank you. So in a couple of minutes' time, we'll start. I'll just request the admin to put the Hive on so that the participants can see everyone.
So, Sumit, we would be told when we are.
I'll just tell you. I'll just tell you.
Okay.
Shall I start? Shall I share, or you will tell me when to share?
We will tell you when to share.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We have 1 more minute. I think they'll start at 2:30. So. Mr. Srinivasan, you're based out of which location?
Bangalore.
How are the things there now? Still.
Things are quite bad. The number of cases are going up, but the government is also sort of worried about livelihoods, and hence they have opened up a. So IT EAST. While during the daytime they want to work from home, but during the nighttime they want to go out and party. So I'm seeing that the restaurants have reduced their occupancy by 50% because of COVID social distancing, but most of the restaurants are full.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and in and around Bangalore, if you look at sort of getaway places like holiday resorts or whatever, you can't get a place. They're all chock-a-block on weekends.
Wow.
So people are partying and holidaying with vengeance.
They're making up for lost time.
Yeah, I hope with masks. I don't know.
Hopefully. No, parts of Europe, I think we are seeing the second wave, and again lockdowns coming in and all that. Yeah.
So should we start?
Yes, Sumit, we can start.
Just for your information, we have around 404 participants logged in now. So that I've checked.
Okay.
The voice is breaking though a bit.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to the post-lunch session of the 19th ICT EAST. Our session is looking into the future with technology lens. We have with us Mr. Arnab Basu, Regional Managing Partner, Eastern India and Bangladesh Technology and Consulting Leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers Private Limited, as the session chairman. We also have with us eminent panelists, Mr. Devashish Banerjee, Managing Director, Distribution, CESC Limited, Mr. S.C. Srinivasan, CFO and Executive Director, Bosch India. We also have with us Mr. Nirmal, VP and Location Head, Kolkata and Bhubaneswar, Capgemini Technology Services India Limited. Thank you everyone for joining the session, and it's over to you, Session Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chakraborty, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you over the WebEx sessions that we are having. It's obviously a new way of, doing this. I have been associated with the ICT East for many, many years, and I think this year is obviously very different for, every one of us. But I think it's also important to understand that, the new normal brings with it certain advantages. Some of the speakers whom we normally would not be able to get because if they're coming from outside Kolkata, they would have to come for a whole day. It's now just a 1 hour session for them, and probably hence we are getting great speakers for our ICT conference. And also for speakers who are inside Kolkata, I think again, rather than a 4 hour commitment, it has become a 1 hour commitment. But I think as we go into the session of what's the technology situation looking like in the future, we really have a very august gathering today, as Sumit spoke of. And while I will go into each of the speakers, I just wanted to lay the context a bit. If you think of the world today, there are certain mega trends that we are seeing, and which has probably been uh, in some ways modified by the current pandemic, but the mega trends still, hold true. And I think the first mega trend I would probably talk of is the asymmetry in the world, right? The asymmetry in the world is probably growing, and while we all want to reduce the asymmetry, at least what I've seen in the last 1 or 2 years, it seems to be growing in a very, very rapid way. And I think it's becoming quite dangerous in terms of the level of asymmetry that we have. If you look at the overall disruption, whether it is technology-led disruption or other disruption in the world, like this pandemic, for example, the number of disruptions in the world is increasing. It's becoming more fractured. It's a world where age has always been talked of as a thing which is like a age is a dividend for us in India. But I think if you can't manage to give work and productive means of earning a livelihood, then age can very quickly become a problem for a young nation like ours in India. And then we have more and more populism which is coming in. The world is becoming more fractured. Geopolitics is becoming very, very fractured now. And then of course the emerging technology trends which keep coming in. Technology is changing at a very rapid pace. It's disrupting business models. It's disrupting many of the businesses which probably over the last 50 or 100 years really thought that they would not be at all, affected by, any kind of technological, challenges or technological innovation. And then there are the new age companies where we have seen that over the last 2 years, there's so many of these startups who have done really well in terms of being able to use technology and bring it to life. But again, some of these which were actually thinking of going and hitting the capital market for an IPO, right now they're struggling to keep themselves afloat, and some of them are almost on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. Right. So I think it's a very different world that we operate in. And if we are talking of some of the new technologies which we keep hearing of, I think the first and big one which we keep hearing about all the time is artificial intelligence. And I think in some way, AI and the algorithms are here to stay. Uh, Let us not have any doubts that a lot of the work that we do now probably would be done better using algorithms. A lot of the work which the algorithms are doing behind the scenes, we don't know that. And so, if you really think of it, a large part of the world is currently being run by AI. It's just that we are unaware of it, but it's becoming more in the face. It's coming in, changing some of the ways we operate. And then the next one I would really like to talk about is the entire thing around Internet of Things and mobility. We have esteemed panel who would talk about it today. But again, in terms of what we are doing, how devices are talking to each other, what's happening on, to mobility in this overall construct is something which is amazing. And I think that's definitely something we need to be aware of. If you look at some of the other essential technologies that we have, blockchain again, something which in some ways some of the other countries have probably made better strides on that, but India is fast catching up and catching up with some of the European nations and the blockchain applications and the usage. If you look at the overall India as a destination where there was a lot of cheap labor earlier, the entire process automation and whether how we are automating everything intelligently is something which is completely changing some of the industries, especially around IT, ITS. And we again have somebody from the ITS and IT industry to talk about that. Uh, if you look at the overall change dynamics of how consumers are being, empowered, how consumers are now being encouraged to, interact with different B2B, B2C operators, AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality is becoming a big, big thing. And in many cases, while we are stuck at home, AR and VR is allowing us to probably experience things which we were never experiencing before from home. And then of course we have a huge focus on drones, robotics, which are coming in. And I can't ever complete a essential emerging tech conversation without mentioning cloud in terms of what's happening on the cloud part. So I think there's obviously these different technologies which are there, but I think the more important thing is how is business adapting to it? How are different verticals adapting to it? How are different industry segments looking at these and adopting them? And one of the few things which we have noticed over the last 6 months is that even within the changed circumstances, we are seeing that customer is being put at the center, rather than the technology, rather than the apps, rather than the people. In most cases, we are putting the customer in the center, and the companies which are doing well, they're doing well because they've been able to put the customer in the center. The other thing is, as I said, that make no uh, doubts about it, efficient machines and algorithms will take over a fair amount of the work which we are doing today. So we have to get comfortable with it. We have to be ready for the change. Some of the change is already there in the market. And if you look at the last 3, 4 months of the COVID crisis, most of the organizations we are talking to, they're saying that, whatever digital transformation we had planned for the next 3 years, we've really gone through that process in the last 4 months, right? And that's what this pandemic has done to digital transformation for ourselves. It has really accelerated the adoption of digital, both from the consumer side as well as from the supply side. And when we look at the world today, resilience has taken on a new meaning. How do you empower people? How do you empower your employees in a virtual environment? How do you look at business networking, business relationships in the new normal? All of these have taken on new meaning. So I think it's very, very important to understand how technology and industry and what's the interplay between them. So with that, I would probably go on to our first speaker, Mr. Srinivasan from Bosch. And Mr. Srinivasan, maybe if you would like to give us your opening comments, and then we can come back with some questions for you. Mr. Srinivasan, you're on mute. If you can just unmute yourself.
Yeah, hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. I think this is a very important subject because irrespective of which industry one is, every industry is going through a Kodak moment. And that Kodak moment is happening due to the massive impact of technologies. And by technology, I mean digital technology. Of course, there are other reasons why this massive disruption is happening. It is also due to the impact of environment issues and others. So I think the objective of every company is to deliver sustained profitable growth. And hence, in that perspective, it's very important that each company is drawing up a vision which focuses on people, planet, and profits. and how can we deliver our sustainable growth and a profitable and a value creation to all the three stakeholders, which is people, planet, and of course the shareholders. And in the context of these two, one is the technology-led disruption that's happening and the new awakening that is happening in the context of people, planet, and profits. Each and every organization, irrespective of the industry, is having to revise or re-engineer its strategies. And all of its strategies is, of course, at the customer and the consumer at the center of it. Even the industry, if you look at it from where I come from, we are a multi-product company into automotive, we are into consumer durables, we are into software. So we are multi-product, but in each of our industries, we find massive change and disruptions happening. We ourselves are trying to move from being an automotive player, we are a technology player worldwide with about 80 billion euros of turnover. We are a high-tech technology company which files about 20,000 patents every year in the automotive segment. But now we want to move towards being a world IoT player in the area of mobility. We also have solutions which deal with climate change and many others. But having said that, if you look at the trends that are happening in our industry, I think whether it is carpooling or ride sharing, the whole shift between fossil fuel to electromobility, or indeed the various software and solutions, what I call as the appification of industry, is whether it is relating to parking or whether it is vehicle maintenance or whether it is Google Maps. The whole area of mobility is also going through a massive disruption. And from our perspective, we are changing from being a pure play product company to a solutions company. I mean, the change is happening in the sense today, even today or 5 years back, there was much more software in the car than what was there 30 years back. So whether it is as simple as car door opening to ignition to many others, everything is digitally controlled. You don't have a case where a mechanic goes under your car to repair it. It is just plug and play through an iPad. You are able to do a vehicle diagnostic. Similarly, in the Autobahn in Germany, when a driver is driving at 300 miles per hour, he is, of course, skilled to drive at that level, but he's got a lot of digital controls which enables him to move at that speed. But even in common day-to-day life, there is a huge amount of digital technology that is coming in, and hence those technologies are now being marketed as standalone software and solutions. And that's where this whole aspect of whether it is on autonomous driving, whether you talk it from level 1 to level 5, autonomous driving may not be possible in India, in Indian roads, but in closed environment, whether it is in airports or whether it is in other office campuses and others, you could have electromobility, you could have various other forms of mobility that could come in, and that could change the industry play. And that has got big opportunities for many people and people who are going to rediscover themselves from a pure play automotive hardware player to become a solutions player. And that's the transformation that we are going through. It is going through over the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, and the pace will only accelerate. So these are my starting comments, and it's very important for every industry not to wait for the change, but also to do lots of war gaming and scenario building to say that what are the art of possibilities. Many of the things that we used to otherwise see as in science fiction movies is now becoming a reality. And that reality is today. The reality is not tomorrow. And hence, it's very important for every industry to say, what are the problem and the pain points which the customer is facing today in our current offerings? And is he ready to pay an extra sum of money? Or is that a solution player who's going to focus on those problems? Is that going to disrupt that industry? We have studied multiple industries. We have done wargaming, and we have seen that, yes, automotive will also go through that change. India will go through the change not like Europe, but India will have its own version of mobility, given the parking problems, given the traffic jam problems, given the fact that you buy a BMW, but you can travel only at 10 kilometers per hour. That itself leads with lots of opportunities for us to focus on. So I'll stay with these starting comments and look forward to other panelists to have their points of view.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. And I think you touched upon some really important points. I think I really like the way you put it: the people, planet, and profit. I think we obviously have seen that the pause that the pandemic has caused all of us to take has really been, very, very good for the planet. And I think as we are all moving out of the lockdowns, we are, starting to re-engage in our, normal lives in whichever way. I think it's very important to keep the planet in the middle of what we are doing, because we can't really replace the planet. We can replace everything else. I think the other thing which you pointed out is very, very important, that a lot of the science fiction which was there earlier is today already a reality. And as Arthur Clarke had famously commented, that magic is just technology that we don't understand yet, right? So, to that extent, I think that's something which is happening in a big way. Probably when we were in our college days and we were reading science fiction, books, a lot of those are now reality today. And I think that pace of change is just getting accelerated and accelerated. The other things which you talked about was the entire shift from fossil fuel to, electric, and of course your comments around how new technology like autonomous driving can still be relevant for India within controlled environments. So I think that gives me a good segue to go to Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee, of course, represents TSC, one of the largest utility players in Eastern India. So, Mr. Banerjee, we did hear Mr. Srinivasan talk about some of the trends, specifically the shift from fossil fuel to electric for cars. But I think even more broadly, as you look at the energy and utility industry, you're a veteran in that. Would like to really understand your thoughts of how you look at the future of that industry, using technology.
Yeah. A very good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to join all of you in such a very relevant topic. Now, let me tell you about my background. Actually, I am not an out and out utility guy. My beginning of my career was with Crompton Greaves and Schneider. The guys, I have seen them operating on a different space altogether. They were dealing with really hardcore products of transformers, switchgears, and all. So they are not now all moved on to digitization and automation, because they feel that we cannot be just a product company. We have to be a solution company. I'm talking about, I was there till 2007. Well, in 2008, I joined the utility space in Reliance, Mumbai, and I was heading that till 2018. I have seen the entire gamut changing, specifically driven by the necessity. There was a competition which came up there, and the competitor was a formidable competitor in the name of Tata's. And we understood that just being a customer oriented organization will not suffice. You will have to be customer centric in the real sense. That means when we are a B2C customer, we cannot take for granted that a consumer will consume and will remain faithful to you unless and until you provide them some kind of value added services which will make them sticky to you. And in the process, I found that a utility, when it needs to change, will have to leapfrog to a different kind of orbit. And that's where I understood that just having an ERP or a GIS is not sufficient, or just having a SCADA and getting data is not sufficient. What is important is to understand that how to capture the data, structure the data, and make use of the data in a sense which will not only improve the operational efficiency, optimize cost, but also give customer-centric solutions. So there's where I started the journey in terms of digitization, and now it's going forward to digitalization. So there I started using the tools of AI and predictive analytics, and people would tell me and that, "Okay, actually, what are you doing? What is your connection with AI and predictive analytics with a utility? What, just because these are buzzwords, that time I'm talking about 2016 or 15, these were buzzwords, and everybody would talk on AI, ML, and all that stuff. But then I started a project there, let me tell you, because something which was bugging me was the outage and the restoration of the consumers. So I knew that any faults happen, it would happen. But then if I can predict and I can do some advanced, planning, then I would actually do a capex at the right time. I would get the best ROE of the capex. At the same time, I would not, subject my system to non-redundancy. That I'm working on something. I have to open the door. Every underground utility or the urban utilities underground permission of this permission, have no inconvenience to the people who are moving on the road, and still get the power back. That's how the faults are rectified, because you will have to access underground. So that's my journey started. When I came to CSC, well, I continued with the journey, and I tried to transform that into reality. And today I understand that today, with the pandemic, preserving the nature capital, the nature's capital, has become very important. And how do we do it? Well, in that journey, actually, I had started that electric mobility in terms of conversion to electric vehicles, because that would effectively reduce the PM10 and PM2.5, which actually are the cause of huge lung problem. And today it has gone to a finer issue of virus, correct, which also is impacting on lungs. So imagine somebody who has already an impacted comorbidity of the lungs. That means he is already subject to stress, and now it's become the for survival of the fittest. So in that case, how to go towards that? And in terms of that, also electric cooking, because a lot of chulas and all that which give a lot of pollution. So I went on that node. So I would like to take you through a presentation very quickly, and I will try to make it relevant for people who understand that power is the fountainhead of the GDP growth. Because whatever we do, we need power. And what we need to do is to provide that uninterrupted power in a fashion. Today, even a small interruption of 24/7 will cause a lot of problem. So actually, while we are going through it, we faced pandemic. Not only pandemic, we faced Amphan. Amphan was one of the worst storm or hurricane to have hit this city, I think, in 150 years or more. It hit us with about 133 kilometers per hour, and wind speed lasting up to 70 to 80 kilometers for about 7 to 8 hours. So all that infrastructure was subject to that dynamic load. But let me tell you, because we had a technology of ring main, we could restore power very fast, because if we had to put up the poles and conductors, we would have taken over a month's time instead of 7 days. So with that, I would start the prelude, my presentation, which would try to hover on the topics that I have covered, and how we have end-use applications. The most important, how to have an application to use to which could be applied in terms of benefit of the organization as well as the customer. So I'll just give it a couple of seconds. I would just share my screen.
Mr. Banerjee, you're on mute. We can see the presentation.
Now you can see me. You see the presentation?
Yes, we can see and hear you both. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me tell you, people who don't know, that CSC is the organization which brought power to India, and it's a company which is over 120 years, and Calcutta was the first city to get power. I will take you through the operational efficiency improvement, digital transformation, analytics, green initiatives, and the new era. We all know that we have been hit with degrowth of our GDP. It's about 24% in the first quarter. For us, it was equally bad because the consumption of industrial and commercial segment, which forms about 50% of our revenue, actually went down drastically, and it is yet to get back to normalcy. While in terms of domestic consumption, because of work from home, that has not gone down drastically. Obviously, things are, as the unlock is happening, things are getting back to normal. And in the month of August, and we found out that a lot of normalcy in terms of industrial operations opening up, as well as the commercial in terms of offices opening up, has helped us regain our consumption levels. Now, if I look on the part of first part in terms of how we connect this pandemic for the opportunity, because every adversity actually brings in the opportunity. So the first is survival. Now, to survive, because my revenue went down, I need to optimize cost. If my cost remains fixed and my revenue goes down, my EBITDA or my PAT gets impacted, and also my cash flow. So how to get the best out of cost in terms of digital adaptability is the first one, because we need to survive. The other thing is, we found out that in this kind of business, in any kind of business, the barrier, the normal business usually is not working. So actually, it has lowered the barriers to change. The third one is the work from anybody and everybody who were not adapting digital tools will have forced to adapt, because whenever we have any kind of infection is spread in any organization, the only way is to quarantine and work from home. So naturally, work from home using digital tools have become easier in the organization. And let me tell you, as I said, my profit margins is under pressure. So in that terms, we have to ensure that how we operate on the best to have a business continuity. So I will get through this, that today, what is the today's DESCOMs? How do you absorb technology, digitalization, and green initiative finally to the future? So operational efficiency improvement, or I would call it building of operational resilience. Let me show you that, this is a pillar box which is there on the roads. We have seen many pillar boxes on the road. And RMU is the power device which switches power from one source to other source, which I said during Amphan, when both the sources were having power, if I cut a section in the middle, the other two sections have power and the power is immediately restored. So we have done automation at even those pillar boxes which are shown on the road for specific essential services. So which helps in faster restoration and lower movement of my transport. Then in terms of self-healing network, we find that there is a fault which has developed in a 33 kV system and there can be a large area outage. We have used programmable logic controllers to automatically switch on to a healthy circuit. So it helps not only the customer, but also helps us in terms of not depleted revenues. We have our captive use of optical fiber network. So we depend less on telcos for that. And we are trying to monetize this also. In terms of SCADA, which I told you, that SCADA is obviously supervisory control of data acquisition today, which we are connecting with the IT and OT structure, so that we can get everything on real time, and my power is there 24/7. This is a slide which shows that how we have big capacity equipments like 220 kV equipments, 132 kV. What we have done is optimize the space in a city riddled with space constraint. We have gone underground in terms of a mall which we have here, so that we don't be there on the ground and engage space. And we have gone in for everything in a container. Basically, this helps us in faster restoration, lower cost, and greater redundancy. Now let's come, how do we use technology? How are we using technology? Now the technology we understand should be proactive, it should not be intrusive, and it should avoid breakdowns. That means it should predict. So we use drones for long and tall towers or transmission towers for and for thermal imaging of 132 kV. That means whenever there are hotspots in that image we find, with the help of the drone, we understand that this is developing a fault. We try to attend to the fault before it occurs so that there is no disruption in power. Then comes the IoT sensor-based online surveillance. We all have a distribution transformers which have sensors embedded to it. So we use the IoT to get the health of the transformer and attend to that if there is a developing fault or there, so that we do not interrupt people. Now, coming to smart meters, we know that if all of the we currently have P4000. We have used smart meter in different way. One is for the high-end consumers and one is for the low-end consumers. For the low-end, we have found out we are using it for loss control. And for the high-end, we are trying to ensure that how we can do home automation and reduce the energy use of flatten the peak. In terms of outage management, we have a state-of-the-art automated outage management system where we can look at what has happened in which place of the city, and we can send our people on a GPS-enabled crew so that we attend to the fault faster. And finally, the GIS system to ensure that how they would reach at the shortest time. Smart meter, as I said, can be the most important thing, right? Most important in a discom, which we all hear, is the loss, the distribution loss. Where our distribution loss is very low, it's sub 10%, much lower. But what we have used is we have used technology. We have used analytics. When we get from the transformer through our AMR, that is remote reading of the transformers, we find the current voltage, etc. So we find out wherever the output of that transformer connected to the consumer is not recorded on the consumer meter. We understand that there is a loss cluster, and we go and attend that loss cluster. It is now coming to technology again. Now we understand that whenever there is a loss, there are pilferages, but we are found out a solution where it's really a permanent solution. What is this pillar box, which we have made an anti-theft pillar box, which we have put in loss-prone areas in Calcutta and various places. By use of any kind of drill or breaking it, it's so strong, and it does not give access to the power from a place where power can be stolen. And this is coaxial cable. The coaxial cable acts in such a way that if it is cut in the middle, then it's disturbed, the supply gets disrupted. You cannot steal. So this technology has helped us, do a surveillance, do a control over the loss-prone areas, even when we are not there, even at the night time. So this is sustainable, and technology has been used for it. Similarly, these other products, I will just work through it. Now we come that as we go through, we have found out that the cybersecurity measures need to be in place very much, because a massive workforce of ours are actually working, on various individual locations and using VPNs. So the first layer, we have ensured that there should be user and network security in terms of somebody accessing the system. He should have the authentication and privilege control, and we check that there is no kind of intrusion from outside. We come to the perimeter security. In terms of perimeter security, I mean wherever our server starts to the internal and the outside world begins. So at that point, in terms of server, we have a NOC, that is network operating center, operation center, and a security operation center. So we find out, we monitor the traffic, and we analyze that if there is an attack and denial of service, we become active and see that how these firewalls help us in breaching, in not breaching of security. And then finally, the monitoring and analysis, which is done on real time, so that we mitigate our threats. Now, coming to the digital transformation and data democratization, because we feel that if there's a data democratization at all the levels, at the front level, we become an agile utility organization, and people can take a fast decision and act fast on the front end. So agile organization is an organization we are trying to build, and we are trying to take decision to the edge. Nobody will tell me that a manager tells a senior manager and then he gets an approval from his general manager and vice president, and then it reaches me. There will be a long cycle and lead time for taking decision, whereas decision needs to be taken on the field. So we are trying to ensure that the guy is equipped at the front end with the required data where he can act. To begin with, the meter reader. The meter reader was usually taking a book before and a ledger. Now it's a tab. Everything is on the tab. He leads the tab. He understands what's happened in the past and all. And then he does download the tab data onto the system. Right. The second part, the second application which I can talk on is the metering on the go. Meter is a very important part of our system, and we need to know where is the meter, which is the location of the meter. So we have developed an application known as metering on the go, and these are all in-house, where you can ask, we can just tell your consumer number and you will get the location of the meter on the map. You can have a life cycle scanning of the meter, and you can understand the consumption data also on that. So this is helping us democratize data at the front end. Now,
Mr. Banerjee, I just wanted to keep you aware that we have a time check, so maybe just
yeah. So
sure.
we have used
Sure.
augmented reality with the help of HoloLens. We ensure that whenever a tripping has happened somewhere, there is a notice which comes on the app on my mobile, and then we can go from remotely, test this and ask the operator to do it. So to customer centric, we give the mobile bills and a mobile app. We are using data analytics with our chatbot, which is backended with AI, ML, and natural language processing. And we are now graduating to voicebot, so that everything is done automatically, and the consumer does not have to wait. And all the data from backend, from SCADA, GIS is procured, and consumer is given service on the go. Virtual, obviously, we are also on social media, and we do a social media listening to. Today, all our services are online, whether it is new connection, change of name, etc. And let me tell you, the online payment curve has improved dramatically. People not getting access to cash centers. ML and blockchain. We have done predictive analytics on asset health, and big data analytics on smart meter and reaping the use of the case. We are operating our switchgears remotely with the help of this app, and creating a digital twin like this, that when we are not there, we can actually walk through our various substations and do things right on the ground. Analytics, we are using, as I say, big data analytics, and we are using all these to improve our customer experience, protect our revenue, and optimize, have workforce automation. One use case, we have used AI-based predictive using just in terms of green initiatives, which is also relevant in terms of technology, in terms of battery storage, etc. We are promoting EVs by putting EV structure, charging. Going for electric cooking, because we are working to ensure the environment is clean, both in terms of mobility and cooking. And as I said, the new era is Internet of Things, home automation, and let me tell you that we talk on renewables. So whether you make renewables or not, you can now purchase renewables on the exchange that is known as green term market on the real time. And that's all. Thank you. I hope I've been able to finish fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banerjee, and apologies for rushing you a bit at the end. But I think it was a really enlightening presentation, and it is. I'm sure all the viewers would be, quite surprised at the amount of digital technologies that are being used by an utility like CSC at the back end, not just in terms of fault tracking, but we heard how we are looking at self-healing networks, how we are using AI for better predictive analytics, how different items which are typical pain points in an utility are being resolved using technology. And I think I really found the entire, augmented reality of how you look at faults and how those waveforms are being looked at. It's really very, very interesting. So thanks for the presentation. It really brought to life how technology is being used by an utility, and we are only, looking at it in terms of I switch it on and light comes on. But as you said that, how do you keep the consumer engaged, and how do you put the consumer at the center of everything that you do is really nice. With that, I would probably go to Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan, you represent the IT/ITS industry, so it would be really good to understand your views of how you are looking at technology of the future and what you are looking at in your industry and also with your clients.
Thanks, Arnav. I'm audible, correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. So going back to March 2020 is if I look at that scenario and me sitting inside the office, 4,000 people working in here, suddenly we have to have people working from home. Okay, we were thinking of a different mindset. We are thinking of doing new transitions, ramp up. The fight was on building up new real estate, new buildings, and all of that was going on all across in the IT/ITS industry. How more people with the H-1B or B-1 visa restrictions and things like that, all those things were getting discussed. All came to an halt suddenly, and the focus was on work from home. And that's what COVID, a simple virus, although I differ from saying it to a simple virus, but it has changed the life and the way.
Mr. Khan, we can't hear you. Maybe the link has a bandwidth issue right now. Just wait for him for maybe another 30 seconds. Otherwise, I'll shift to you, Mr. Srinivasan, for some additional questions I had. So, Mr. Srinivasan, while we wait for Mr. Khan to come back online, let me go to you and ask you, some questions which I, had jotted down when you were talking. So you really talked about, how Bosch being a, multi-competency or a multi-product company, play in the auto segment, in the consumer durables, software segment, and now you're also looking at changing from being a product company to a solutions company. When you look at this, and when you also, try and look at the third P of your people, planet, and profits, uh, how has this been, sort of done? How is the investments into new technology been seen at a corporate level? How are you looking at these kind of investments, and what kind of benefits are being looked at from each of them?
Thank you. I mean, it's quite strange. I mean, during this work from home period, I'm told the most used sentence in the digital space is, "Am I audible?" So now we are faced that facing that situation of am I audible? But having said that, coming back to your question, Bosch, not many people know that Bosch is one of the largest private companies in the world. It's not a listed entity. Actually, it's owned by a foundation. It's owned by a foundation. So the profits of Bosch, a large part of it is invested into a foundation, which then carries on many of the charitable or socially or planet related activities, as I would say. And part of it is, of course, reinvestment back. But I think Bosch has always been a long term technology player, investing anywhere between 8 to 10% of its turnover. Yeah, 8 to 10% of its turnover in R&D and development. Most companies spend probably anywhere between 1 to 3%, but we have been spending about 8 to 10%. And the largest R&D center outside of Germany is in India. So as we want to move from being a product company and also become a solutions companies, we have invested. I mean, we are the largest producers of sensors in the world, whether it is automotive sensors or sensors that are used in mobile phones and others. But I think the DNA of the company has to change from being a product company to a solutions company. And that's where we have to embrace VUCA in every sense of the term. So far, the term VUCA has been in PowerPoint charts. And with COVID, the term VUCA has come to the center of the plate. And hence, certain changes to really start looking at to say that how do we really bring a scenario-based thinking? Because as you grow into new horizons and new offerings, you don't have a deterministic model to plan your future, but you have a more scenario-based understanding. In a product business, you can think global because you design a product for global use. For example, it could be an Apple phone. There is one platform, and you can sort of launch it across the world. But in a solution tends to be hyper local because problems are different. The problems in Europe is very different from the problems in India or indeed Africa. And hence, to be able to be successful in a solutions business, you need to build and be involved in ecosystem, building the ecosystem, because solutions will not work standalone. You need to be able to influence the ecosystem as well. And hence, from our own perspective, we had to shift from a concept of IRR-based capital assets, investment-based, to the concept of cash burn, which in itself a different mindset, where the probability of return. I mean, you are focused on as much on return of capital as you are focused on return on capital, because it's quite possible that many of new innovations you are getting in, your capital itself could be eroded. But having said that, some of the key areas, that is to bring in exponential thinking like staff on demand, or using and leveraging community, or for that matter, focusing on algorithm as assets rather than physical assets, or for that matter, uh, leveraging assets of the ecosystem. These are some of the changes that we had to make in our own business model thinking. And we are now focused more on how can we, one, activate or create a network and then have a multiplier effect arising out of that network. We have also been quite active in organic area. You may have heard about 2 weeks back some announcements on some of the investments that globally we have made in electromobility companies and others. And hence, it's a new mindset, it's a new ways of thinking, which is much more agile. I mean, our own long-term plans. I mean, the fact that long-term planning has gone out of the window, and our long-term plans are maybe about 1 year old, and then it's goes on a revolving forecast, so that we have the ability to pivot. Thankfully, in these periods, cash is king. Hence, having a very strong balance sheet and ability to deploy it very structurally, very advantageously, is a very key aspect that we are focusing on. But having said that, of course, we are focusing on new customers. I mean, traditionally, our OEMs or the vehicle manufacturers have been our customers, but now you have new progressive mobility players like the Uber, the Ola, and many others who have become our customers. We are also focusing on product portfolio to really say that how do we bring new product portfolios and in terms of whether it is on battery manufacturing or indeed battery management systems, which are very different from fossil fuel based technologies. And hence that has required a completely new thinking in terms of our own manufacturing footprints. And hence we are also going through a massive amount of restructuring, reskilling, redeployment as well. In this regard, I want to bring digital as well. Digital transformation is a very big element, and there it is all about, again, about people transformation, bringing the mindset of digital processes, and indeed digital business models. And I think to summarize, I would say that for us to be able to make an impact in the new solutions business or the business emerging opportunities of the future, there is a multifaceted transformation that we are having to go through, and that's the journey which we are on.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, and very informative and very interesting. As you said, of how you're looking at the investments. So, Mr. Khan, are you back? Can we come back to you?
Yes, you're able to
Yeah,
hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. So, yeah, back to
You
you.
lost me. I think I was telling about the people, process, technology part, and
Yes,
that's where I got disconnected.
yes.
So apologies for that. But yeah, coming back to people. So while we think about people who do the work, there's a need to have the right set of people in place. But technology often plays a very big role in terms of innovation, and that's where people and technology play a big role. Even in processes, which are typically actions that needs to happen for people to execute processes as per the requirements. In such a situation, technology actually helps automate the processes. Okay? So even in a process, the automation comes into picture. And technology as a technology in as one of the three pillars, as I mentioned, people, process, technology, that's the common denominator for people and processes in any industry, especially in our unprecedented times, because that has really shown the wonders. We have come across out of the situation where we had been in the month of end of March 2020. The way we are operating in any of the industry and still with whatever resources and the nature of challenges that we have, we are still able to survive is because of technology playing a big role. And what we are seeing, because a lot has changed in the IT industry from the COVID situation which arose. As I was mentioning at the start, that the real estate or offices used to play a big role, but now we are looking at it differently. 100% work from home or near 100% work from home was never kind of a situation. I am taking this call from the office, which is a 4,000-seater office, and me and 9 other people are in office in a 4,000-seater office. Wherein few months back, we were fighting for additional space, new growth, new ramp ups, new building, and things like that.
So
Low
what
cost
is it
operator.
doing for, from a business continuity and also from a cyber risk perspective? Anything which you're looking at differently now?
Absolutely. So from a business continuity perspective, it's an important piece because clients have come back and they have been asking about that, because you have now, because initially there was a big apprehension, the banking, financial services, insurance kind of clients who are very, very finicky about the way operations happen in their own ODCs, the offshore delivery centers, which are locked down ODCs, and you have fingerprinting and this and that before you enter those. How can, in such a situation, people can work from home? So we have lived with the situation, proved it that it can happen, and extremely increased focus in terms of cybersecurity, data security, and other aspects plays a very, very important role. The operating model for the entire business continuity is reset, especially for supply chain, specifically for manufacturing and those kind of industries, which we also cater to support our clients in there. We are seeing there is a way change in terms of the operating model which is coming up. And they want more and more innovative technological solutions, innovation being the key and all of that. the digital laggards, who have not been able to come up in the current situation, have really suffered significantly, and they are substantially disadvantaged in the current situation. So my view, just a couple of points before I wrap it up, is refocusing on the digital efforts to meet the customer or the client expectations is one of the key. Looking at business continuity as a revamped, revised new model, servicing them, cybersecurity and all of that taken into consideration. New digital channels like the AI, ML, VR, and all of the speakers, esteemed panelists have discussed all of that. I don't want to go into the details. Modernize the existing tech capabilities, which is the most important piece. Yeah, we have tech capabilities, but where we are today is not going to take us. Tomorrow would be different. And if we don't keep on innovating, thinking differently, invest in transformation, invest in technology, we will be the Kodaks of the world, as very rightly said by one of our panelists. And build cloud-based data platforms, focus on the strengthening existing client base that we have. And indeed, we'll have certain challenges in the industry. And if anybody has any questions, we'll take it up. But in the interest of time, Arnab, that's it from my side.
Thank you, Nirmala. And again, we obviously heard from the three panelists. I think we've come to the end of our time, our allotted time. But I think I'll just do a very quick wrap up of what we heard. Obviously from Mr. Srinivasan, we heard about how Bosch as a company is changing. Their investments in R&D, how they're looking at people, planet, profits, and not just profits. What are their, some of their inorganic plans. We understood how they're looking at shifting from a product to a, solutions company, and some of the things which they're doing. Obviously, Mr. Banerjee gave us a, brilliant view into how CSE is utilizing technology and how each of these emerging technologies that we keep talking about, how they have really come to life inside the organization with the examples which he showed us. And I think I found it quite fascinating in terms of how at the back end all these are happening when I as a consumer don't think of it that way. And then of course, Nirmala, from your side, we heard how the ITES industry is morphing, the greater focus on not just on technology but also on people and process, and some of the changes which you have brought in, and specific to some of the cyber risks, which again Mr. Banerjee also talked of in terms of some of the initiatives that are being taken up. So I think with that, I would like to bring this session to a close. We don't have time for questions, so I would, because I can see the next panel already joining us on this, so I wouldn't like to really go over our allotted time. Back to you, Sumit. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to moderate this panel, and I would like to thank each of you personally and also on behalf of CII to be here and share your thoughts with us over the last 1 hour. Back to you, Sumit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basu. Thank you very much, Mr. Banerjee, Mr. Srinivasan, and Mr. Khan. Thank you for joining us and sharing your perspectives. So with that, we come to the close of this session and we move to the next session, Analytics as a Growth Engine. We have with us Mr. Joydeep Dattagupta, is a partner Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP. We have also with us Mr. Dhruvabrata Ghosh, Managing Director, Data and Digital Productivity. We have with us Mr. Rohan Verma, CEO and Executive Director, MapMa India. We have also with us Mr. Kosturi, CEO, AI. So I hand over to Mr. Joydeep Dattagupta to chair the session, please. Over to you, Joydeep. You're on mute. If you can kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. And it is a privilege for me to be back again CII IT East. And of course, this year it's a very different context and a very different format. But I think the present pandemic gives us an opportunity also to engage with each other, to exchange views and thoughts. And we have today a very august panel who are here to discuss a subject of great interest and of particular interest in the context of the pandemic, because now we're talking about growth, whereas possibly the rest of the world is talking about survival, but we have gone beyond that, and this panel is very bravely going to talk about growth and how analytics can can be the engine for growth. Conventionally, growth was considered to be, in a traditional context, I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago, the thinking was, profitable growth, grow slowly, don't more than you can chew. And so it was much about organic growth. Then the market started demanding a lot more, and from organic growth, the growth models became inorganic growth. So there was a lot of merger and acquisition in the market, and that continues till today. However, a third element of growth recently emerged, and that was innovation-led growth. Okay? So possibly, when you look at innovation-led growth, it's not just a question of merging with somebody else, and then that becomes larger, and then you look for synergies in that merger, but you look for how you can create something new, and or it might be new product, it might be new service, it might be a new business model, it might be new insights, or new kind of differentiation that you can have. So what our panel is going to discuss this afternoon is analytics and how analytics can help with or can lead growth. And clearly, we are talking here about innovation-led growth. Some of the very high growth companies that we have seen recently are invariably they have digital led growth, and they have demonstrated the ability to scale exponentially. But behind that are a few enablers. Clearly, one of the enablers is the infrastructure scalability, and availability and scalability is one of the enablers to that. But there are also deep algorithms which have helped some of these companies to scale, to differentiate themselves, to reach out to a very large number of customers, and also their digital design of their supply chains to make their products and processes available so that their product is on the shelf, so to say, when their customers reach out. And what they have demonstrated also is that they use analytics to to mass personalize and reach out to customers. They get to know a lot more about each customer, their preferences, what they like to buy, and use that data. So we have enormous data storage today, but data also comes in different formats. It's not traditionally anymore, it's not just about data, it's about images, it's about videos, it's about emotions also that you can see. And there are technologies today which can analyze all of this, and there's enormous computing power that helps companies do this. But it's not only the world of business, it's also the world of society at large. And analytics play a key role in helping shape our society in areas such as healthcare, in areas such as governance, in many other areas. And analytics is gaining ground increasingly. Of course, there are a lot of challenges also, and we hope to cover some of that in this session of ours. As I said, we have a very august panel, and what we'd like to do here is we'd like to go around the room and hear some opening thoughts from our panelists, and then have more of an interactive session across the panelists, but also with the audience as we go along. So I'd like to request our first panelist, who is Gautam Banerjee, to share his thoughts with us. Gautam Banerjee is a true-blooded data scientist. Okay? He's not someone who just carries the tag of data scientist, but he's a true-blooded data scientist, and it is a privilege to listen to him talk. And every interaction, whoever is talking to him goes away knowing a lot this complex subject. So, without much ado, I'd like to request Gautam to share some of his insight on the subject.
Thanks, Mr. Joydeep. So it's a privilege to be part of such an esteemed panelists, and thank CAI for organizing this event. So what I'll do is that I'll take two examples. One from the industry, wherein we may be knowing the brand, we may be knowing the business, but we may not be knowing how they are leveraging analytics and AI for their growth. And then one example that I'll take from one of the projects that we have done as a company, and then we'll talk some of the challenges. So I'll talk about Caterpillar to begin with, and more Caterpillar, the thing that comes in our mind is a huge, sturdy, earth-moving vehicle. Because we all know that Caterpillar is into these kind of activities. Their vehicles are very sturdy, robust in construction sites, in mining, and other areas, right? Now, it is interesting to note that for the last 6 years, a little more than 6 years, 60% of the revenue that Caterpillar is earning is not from either leasing or selling these vehicles. The 60% of the revenue that Caterpillar is earning is either from consulting services or fully digitizing or automating the mines across the world. Okay. Now, how did this happen? This happened because of the fact that Caterpillar started installing sensors into these vehicles, which are being deployed in different mines across the world, starting from Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan to Cambodia and in many parts, including Siberia, and started getting data. So the exact time of loading, unloading, the amount of weight which is being loaded, the kind of distance that they are traveling, the kind of frequency of the maintenance, everything is actually recorded from these hundreds of mines through the sensors coming from these vehicles to Caterpillar. And Caterpillar actually mined this data, enormous information, I'll say, and then made this data as their base to understand how to improve the operational efficiency of a mine. And they started almost 7 years back, 8 years back, with the consulting services, saying that it's not only supplying these vehicles, but then we can actually help you in consulting services to improve the operational efficiency. And then finally, since the last 6 years, it is surprising to know, whoever doesn't, that they are actually managing almost 7 mines in the world, including one in Siberia, which are completely without human beings on the ground level. So they have automated these mines. Okay, so a company which was more into the conventional, business model of selling and leasing vehicles has moved into not only consulting, but it's basically now digital automation that they're actually offering. So this is growth through analytics, and it involves different kinds of data, includes preventive maintenance, includes live stream of data, from sensors. So it's a big project. But I just wanted to tell you the story so that we understand when we say growth by analytics, to what extent it can take industry or a company. The second example I'll talk about, something that we have done. It was basically a cement industry wherein there was an acquisition by a big, multinational company, and then they wanted to actually have the branding done in the quickest possible time so that they can relaunch the brand across India. And India being India, the vastness and the diversity, so it includes, whenever you do the branding, it includes not thousands but couple of thousands of vendors across the country to have their flags, billboards, paintings on the walls, inside the godowns, inside the retailers, distributor shops, to be done, and this is an enormous logistical challenge to identify these areas, give the orders to different kind of vendors, and raise the invoices. They have different kind of rates depending on the kind of branding that's being done, the painting and other stuff, depending whether it's a flex, a painting, a boot, or something. And it takes a lot of time, and they had less time. And what we did was that we actually developed an application, an Android-based application, which will take the photo. So the vendor who is doing that work will just take that is done and upload that. And dealer, where it's being done, will also do that. So these two will take the images. They'll, we had image cognition algorithm out there, which will take the dimensions that will compute as per the type of the work that is being done, apply the rates to compute it, and take the GIS locations, verify the GIS locations with those of the retailers and the distributors. And once the vendor actually submits the invoice with the digital photo embedded, that what work they have done, it will automatically again match that image with the database for automatic approval of the invoice. So that basically did cost a lot of time, effort, completely remove the physical inspection part, where a lot of fudge is used to be there as well. At times, people never used to do it, but then have an approval, and it was basically smooth, fasten the process, and improve the billing life cycle for the vendors as well, and they could negotiate the price, because otherwise the billing used to happen over a period of 5 months, 6 months, which happened actually in flat 45 days after the invoice is submitted and getting approved. Approval was a digital process. So again, growth for this company which did the acquisition, and the kind of branding they could do in the minimal possible time was possible because of certain algorithms and applications, right, using analytics. This was image cognition with certain other algorithms as well. But then I think, having said, called out these two examples, I think it is important to also call out, certain challenges, because most of us, whenever we go to a seminar or summit, we do hear the possibilities, expectations, and, promise of a new technology, but we rarely talk about the challenges and the failures. And I think here it's important to note that there are failures as well. In fact, failures are not rare. There are projects which get on hold. There are projects which never kick off. There are projects which actually get stuck at the end, and there's a lot of frustration. If you go through, CIO Weekly, Forbes, you will get in McKinsey, issues. You will see a lot of articles coming out there, and I would like to call out a couple of these. One of them is basically being the challenge of differentiating it with so-called IT systems. Okay, now most of the CXOs, CIOs, CTOs do have very good background with last 30, 40 years of IT implementation, and not all, but many of them try to basically put this as well, the data science, AI, analytics, as part of the IT deployment. Now the life cycle is completely different. It is not so deterministic. This is more of research-based algorithms for a similar product. Can differ depending on the process or even the demographic locations. And we one has to appreciate that, because this is experimental, right? And that's why you will see that more captive units of analytics data science are more successful than outsourcing it, because there's a mismatch in the expectations. The other thing is basically the data. So while we think most of the time that we have got a lot of data, at times data may not be in the right format. Even if it is digitized, at times it is still not in the right format. So there can be an image of an invoice or an image of a legal document which may not be readable. And obviously there are problems with the data quality, the dimension, the outliers, the missing values, and other things, right? So that is again a challenge, and the biggest challenge is basically the logic. So it's not a very complex business logic that we are talking about. These are not the errors that we normally find in a IT application, which is information update, delete, retrieval, and maybe very complex workflow. But these errors are basically like false positive or false negatives, and it can have a lot of impact, right? So the decision-making process is more of a fuzzy logic. And to explain what it is, I'll take a very simple example, a hypothetical example though, but it may help us to understand. Saying that, assume that I'm a barber, and I wear a T-shirt. Back of the T-shirt, it's written, "I shave people who do not shave themselves." Right? And early in the morning, I get up, I wear the T-shirt, I shave myself, and I go to the salon now to shave others. Now the question is that whether that statement that's there on the back of my T-shirt is right or wrong. So, because it says that I shave people who do not shave themselves, but I shaved myself, right? And I'm going to shave others as well. So that's fuzzy logic. And one of the things, that comes to fuzzy logic is that, October 2018 at the Google office at Milpitas, we had a meeting, where we were discussing about, an aspect of automated cars. If anyone, many of us have been to Silicon Valley. In these days, you go to Sunnyvale, Milpitas, you will actually get to see these, automated cars moving around with, cameras hooked onto their roof. We are now at a stage where it's not only image cognition, understanding the signals, pedestrians, crossing the road, and type of vehicles. But now we're in a situation where we discussed a case for almost 2 days, wherein we are saying that automated car is driving at a speed of 80 miles per hour, which is equivalent to 110 kilometers to 20 kilometers an hour. And suddenly a kid comes to pick up a ball which just came onto the road from the nearby park, and the kid is around 20 to 30 meters away. And at the back seat of the car there is a newborn child with her mother. Now there are three options. One is that you force stop the car, within that limit of range of distance, so which will definitely cause severe injury to the child in spite of any airbags, number of airbags that can be in the car. Or otherwise, while you apply the brakes, but you apply the brakes with some steering of the wheel so that the car takes into a different direction. But then that can cause a potential impact of accidents to the pedestrians who are walking, right? Or otherwise, the worst option is that you just try to break it, but in all possibility, if you do not apply that kind of force, you may actually kill the kid who is in front of the car. So now we are actually now at a cusp of a situation wherein these kind of decision making has to be enabled. And that's why there is some delay in these kind of full scale rollouts for public use, right? So all that I'm trying to say is that while there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of expectations, there are a lot of success stories that I myself called out. At the same time, we have to take care about the challenges in a way that will help us mitigate these risks, have contingency plans, and ensure that the rollout is better. It can be phased, it can be slow, but then much smoother, and then sustained in a long-term perspective. Over, Johnny, back to you.
I guessed as much that you are over. And Gautam, thank you so much. I think everyone is now very taken up by the ethical dilemma that at the end of it around decision to model, right? I wonder what we would have done had we actually been driving the car and not trying to model. So these are some interesting ethical dilemmas, and I don't know. Perhaps we will not. We might not move directly from a situation of us driving cars to autonomous vehicles in one shot. It might be something like we've had autonomous vehicles for many, many years. Maybe 30 years ago, I went, in the Docklands in London, the Docklands Light Railway, there was no driver, right? So it moved along a certain track. Okay. So possibly we will get there in time around those. But Gautam, thank you so much for sharing some of these stories around, which is very fascinating, around Caterpillar being having 60% of their revenue now from consulting,
Yes.
and data help them to move towards backward integration right into managing mines, which are completely and fully automated. Imagine the kind of mindset that brings about, and how it can help with human lives, if nothing else. And also your story around your cement industry client and the branding side was fascinating, because that opens up a lot of possibilities around virtualization.
Yeah.
So you could be sitting anywhere and working on something anywhere else. And we are actually discovering that more and more as we work from home. So if you can work from home, then your home could be anywhere in the world so long as you have network connectivity. So there is a huge opportunity that the world has to connect expertise and data from various different parts of the world, and have a very integrated, efficient experience. So
Absolutely.
thanks for letting us worry about that ethical dilemma as we move into the next to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Kosturi Bhattacharya, and Kosturi has immersed herself in artificial intelligence and of late, and I think she will bring to us a different perspective on this, not just on business case studies, but also the world of healthcare. So, Kosturi, over to you.
Thank you, Jayadipta. Let me start a bit with growth analytics, because the topic is analytics as a growth engine. And Gautam's case study about the caterpillar is fascinating, because that kind of ties in with the story that I have. So yes, one of the key areas of applications of analytics today, in fact, it is being defined as growth analytics. Growth analytics is termed as is coined as a term these days, where the pillars of growth and the identification of growth metrics is being measured against the actual growth. The difference being earlier, there used to be reporting, there used to be sales dashboards, there used to be lead generation, pricing models, performance, retention. Those were there, and for a very long time, those performances were evaluated but in a form of static data. Never had been the case, which is happening today, where a growth metric itself is being defined by data analytics. Because most of the time, you really are, using empirical data to define your growth metric. Not really what is actually affecting your growth is something which probably was so far not visible to us. I'll give you an example. Airbnb. After doing data analytics and after chartering and mapping what is actually spurring their growth, a very simple fact emerged, which is if you had professionally taken photograph of what you're renting out, that increases the chance of your bookings at least 3 to 5 times. So this growth metric, you never knew it, from your traditional knowledge of how to do your sell and what to do your sales as. So now it can be tracked against, professional photograph is so the growth metric is now defined. Now the actual can be tracked and really correlated to this. Similarly, there are organizations who use this elasticity of pricing. It's known, right? I mean, Ubers, the taxis, rental taxis, they use peak of peak pricing. Then there is even retail stores where, the promotionals. Today, all of that as well are being used. How are you going to be predicting your pricing? How do you know at what is the level at which a particular clientele or in a demography or in a geography that somebody is willing to pay that price? So today, this dynamic pricing is also being done as a growth metric, as an identifier of growth metric, and that elasticity in pricing are being done through data analytics. Similarly, there are companies like Airbnb, Craigslist, Dropbox, Hotmail. They live on virality. the amount of the amount of social postings and people's viewership and the comments that they're, so their entire sort of marketing strategy depends on virality. How viral are you going? And these two are the function of, whether you call it data analytics or artificial intelligence or NLP, and all of it in parts. But that is what, these the advantages. So yes, growth analytics is certainly something which is evolving, and it is done purely on the basis of data analytics, big data at times, and all of this. Coming to some closer to home case studies, and this is, I'm going to shift a bit and talk about, couple of uh, pilots and POCs we are doing in the manufacturing segment. And this has been a discovery, actually, to be very honest with you. We didn't know, and the client was very kind enough to work with us. And going again back to the Caterpillar, it's almost in a similar lines I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about three. I won't take too much time in describing three case studies, but I'm going to talk about how we are using data and artificial intelligence, mainly data processing, which is the biggest chunk of the work that has to be done. Everybody on the panel knows that. Cleaning, pre-processing the data wrangling part of it is the most laborious part of it, and then coming to application of the models. I'll talk about one of the, we just implemented this. This is one of, a manufacturing company, a manufacturer of gases, one of the largest in the world. They manufacture industrial gas, oxygen for healthcare use, and different kinds of gases. One of the things is, and Gautam talked about sensor data as well. So they have modernized their production plants with even the machines which are sensor based. They are monitoring every parameter of, humidity, temperature, power consumption, name it. I mean, there's probably 10,000 permutation combinations of parameters that are used to create this precision product, which is a gas. An oxygen that is required for a patient care in a hospital has to be extremely precise. How did they arrive at that preciseness? Again, I go back to the empirical nature of how it was being done erstwhile. It's always dependent on human expertise that have been doing that for, I'd say, last 20 years or 50 years, that has been imparted from person to person, and a huge reliance on how. Now, and the other part is, now that they have such sophisticated machines where your sensor data is actually reflecting what data, but what does it mean? Do you really know what a certain a 10 degree centigrade temperature with a humidity level and a pH balance of XYZ does to your product? No, you don't. You guesstimate, because that is how it is. Now we have the power to use these kinds of data to actually create scientific evidences and experimentation and algorithms to arrive at the near perfect values of each one of those settings, to give you almost a quality, that this quality of gas or this quality of whichever product can come out with the combination and permutation of certain number of process variables. So that's one of the ways we are kind of helping our clients. Similarly, we are working with another, this is an iron refractory. Again, the grade that is coming out, the raw material, the question is, the raw material is the same. And each and every time, why do I have a different set of grade of product that comes out? Why does it differ when it is summer and when it is winter or when it is rainy? Can you actually point out to me what is it? What exactly what parameter at what level and what variable does it affect my product from the raw material, because the raw material is the same. Again, the use of data is being used. Another one, and this is it's almost instantaneous results we've seen, where solar panels. Solar panels, typically when they're manufactured through a production unit, at the end of the day, a panel consists of several cells, a multitude of cells. The QA is done at the end of the production cycle. When the QA is done, if there is a faulty panel, the entire panel has to be thrown out. What if we did the QA at the beginning of the cycle, where the individual cells are being put together in the panel? But it is virtually impossible, even for a machine or an eye, to detect where the fault lies. And this is where we can use image processing with AI to detect it even early in the production cycle, so that at the cellular level it can be thrown out and it doesn't have to be put in the panel to do the QA check at the end. So these are some of the examples where, not only for, of course, as I said, growth analytics, growth, every area, whether it is, the metrication of how you're going to achieve what you're going to achieve, what is the growth metric, starting from the definition of the growth metrics, also to the way where you can actually operationally carry on these kinds of activities where data is becoming hugely important. Maybe in the next segment, Joydipta, I can address what is happening in the life sciences and healthcare. And there's a humongous amount of case studies and things that is happening in that. That's another huge area we can address. You are on mute, I think.
For some new ideas here, that metrics themselves can be are dependent or defined by analytics. So it's not as though you have a fixed metric and then you analyze data against that, but the metric itself can be determined by analytics. And you give some very good examples from everyday life, from very traditional industries, where the thought process was you have a very good machine operator, so to say, or a technician who has years and years of experience, and such technicians traditionally used to be considered artists. So whether it's an art or a science, like when I first went to an aluminium plant, they were very proud that rolling aluminium is an art. It is not just a science. So you're moving from that realm to moving the entire thing to the realm of a science, which is based on data, permutations, combinations, what causes a certain quality point and what can cause a different quality point. Okay, so you're taking traditional industries. You're not just talking about dot-coms and the world of high growth customer acquisition based businesses, but even traditional businesses. There are so many applications where now that the computing power is in place to analyze data that sensors pick up, you can revolutionize the capability of an organization and thereby lead to growth. Because if the plant will run itself, then it's only capital, and that is your inhibitor to setting up more and more of these plants and meeting demand. You're no longer restricted by high quality, availability of high quality human resources or human beings who you need to send to places where they don't want to live. Okay. So I think this panel is coming up with a lot of thoughts for us to think about around traditional industries like mining, like producing oxygen and cement and iron refractories and so on, and even solar panels. So perhaps the second round we'll hear about healthcare. But our next speaker is Dhruvo Ghosh, who makes a living out of this, out of data and analytics. And he has a few interesting stories to share. So over to you, Dhruvo.
Thanks, Jadip. A few years ago, oil was that important. It still is, right? But data is becoming the new oil. And as you rightly said, that with the computing power which is there today, and when you combine it with data itself, the power is enormous. If you look at what is usable data around us, it's roughly around 33% of the data which is usable. And we end up using perhaps 0.5% of the data. And that's something which is getting resolved as we take more and more analytics and computing to move towards that direction. Now, if I look at any organization, right, they would be using data predominantly for the purpose of, let's say, revenue maximization or cost optimization or customer satisfaction. And in the worst case, for mitigating risks, right? Now, since we are talking about customer satisfaction, I'll take a few examples on customer analytics. Kasturi touched upon growth analytics or growth drivers, right? Customer itself also forms one of the major aspects of growth analytics. Now, if I talk about customers traditionally, right, what big organizations like banks or telecom operators have been trying to do is acquire customers. In the yesteryears, the thought was more like, I'll build a product and the customers will come for it. Now that has significantly changed. In the era of personalization, people are more wanting to see something which is personalized for them or something which better suits their needs, right? And that's where customer analytics starts to play a big role. What we understand about customer analytics, if you look at the customer value management, right? And when we are working with banking and financial services institutions or with telecom operators, what they are trying to do is they're trying to sell, cross-sell or upsell to their customers or trying to acquire customers. And in today's parlance, this is known as either a next best offer or a next best action. Now, how do they do that? End of the day, they are using analytics for the purpose of trying to do this cross-sell and upsell. What we do in such a scenario is we first go and segment the customers, not a traditional empirical rule-based approach, but more of a clustering approach where we start clustering customers into different segments. And there are different kinds of techniques like K-means, CADE, all helping you to cluster and understand your customers. Now, once you have understood your customers, you start creating models which will help you identify what best suits them. Let's say for a banking and financial services, they might look for what can I sell to a person who has a savings account? Should I sell a credit card? Or let's say he uses a credit card but travels a lot. Should I give him a credit card with a lounge access? Let's say if you're talking about a telecom operator with a prepaid plan, should I give him a certain recharge for a certain date? So they're trying to understand the consumer behavior from this. They're trying to create a model which will help them. And these models are the machine learning models like an artificial neural network, can be machine learning models like, or the ensemble techniques like boosting algorithm, random forest. They are trying to create, at the end of the day, a likelihood which will suit your customer. And what we started is that we end up overworking these machine learning models. And what we would have to do is we will always have to do out of time sampling to help them understand what suits and what. trying to acquire or you're trying to upsell, cross-sell to your customers. And for a media, we are trying to understand media from social intelligence, from the digital medium, from the TV medium, from the newspaper medium, and combine it with the social. Now, what is the scenario? We are trying to understand what the consumer thinks, and trying to look at different information. It can be images, it can be end of the day text. We are trying to pull those information and create a story, understand what he or she, news organization, they would be tracking the story and how the actually till the end of the day to see what categorizes for prime time and not prime. Uh, when such a scenario, they need to is a technique kind of helps and what doesn't. And, one thing which is becoming more and more clear to us is right? And we believe that it is one of the drivers for customer growth. So when we kind of look at growth, customer definitely plays a role. Centric world, and we to strike a balance between personalization, customer emotion should you pull for the purpose of showcasing or making. And that's, I think, a battle which is really started in the developed world and also into our consumer. How much do you really take from places like LinkedIn and others to personalize them? That will keep going, which customer analysis playing a role in today's world continue to play a role. Back to you, Jaydeep.
Thank you so much, because you have introduced a very interesting mention. We're so far talking about mine. You're talking about cement and oxygen plants and factories. You brought in companies and dimension of data, and how do you segment or create the cluster based on what kind of preferences that you study. And you study those preferences not just from data, but also from images, from videos, from a whole host of different types of preferences to try and understand your customer better and better, and understand the life cycle of an individual customer. What is the next would be of value to that customer? And that's a world where it is moving from the metric being customer satisfaction to the metric becoming customer acquisition. Difference between satisfaction and acquisition. In other words, it completely changes the game. It's a game changer, and analytics can be a game changer in growth, because growth is much about customer acquisition. You also raised a very interesting question around the ethical dilemmas around privacy of customer data that somebody has. And most organizations tend to say, no, 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 we would never share individual data, right? data of an individual. We'd never look at it. We are more interested in a group or a cluster and so on. So the individuals have deep suspicion about many of social media companies, right? And you wonder that are they selling our data, right? And they will always deny it, saying we never sell individual data, we'll never do that. It is more insights around segments, but we'll have more of that later. We'd like to come to our final panelist, Rohan Verma, of a very different type of organization. We talk about mapping, right? And when I was a child, it was all about the geological, the survey of India, right? Who had those survey maps and so on. So I think this company on steroids and taken that completely different level altogether. So we'd like to hear from you, Rohan.
Thanks a lot, Joydeep Das. So, yeah, that was a different world when the Survey of India was making the maps in the physical format. And now we are in a much different world where we are in the digital world. And that's what the work Map India has done the last 25 years, which is build the most comprehensive digital map and geospatial database for the entire country, and then applied a lot of deep tech, all indigenously built around geospatial analytics, around navigation, around IoT, sensors, tracking, and telematics, and generally what is known as geographic information systems, and brought the benefit to our 5,000 enterprise customers across all the verticals in the private sector, as well as in the public sector and the automotive domain. So I'm very happy to be part of your panel, Growth and Analytics. I will talk about geospatial analytics because that's our expertise, and a few of the panelists slightly touched on it before. And but let me start with a zoomed out view on growth. Fundamentally, when you're talking about growth, you are looking to, as an organization, make more money or save more money, and you'll only grow and make more money if your product experience or your service experience for all the users, your external users, meaning customers or partners, as well as your internal users, meaning your employees and vendors, etc., have a great digital experience or a great experience. So fundamentally, when somebody is looking to grow, the business objective is to make more money, save more money, and offer a better, differentiated, compelling experience. And that's where we bring the power of geospatial analytics to assist with these objectives in a very unique, niche, but powerful manner. Let let me use some practical case studies to highlight that. And I'll start with not a private sector example, but a government example. So the Tax Department of India, which is the Central Board of Direct Taxes, they also have a growth target on their head to generate revenue and to maximize the tax net and basically fairly tax the people who are earning taxable income. So they gave us a project, a very large project, along with some of the large systems integrators like L&T Infotech, where they said we would like to geocode or geotag every taxpayer across the country. So basically, we all fill up our income tax return and we put in our address. We also do lots of purchases and sale activities. So we have credit card statements, we have our other kinds of information where our addresses we put. Now, what MapIndia did to help the tax department earn more revenue or make more money is basically help them geocode and visualize first and then analyze where the taxpayers were. So, because we have built the digital map down to house address level in the urban areas, so not just at a locality level, but down to building level or sub-locality as well as sub-locality level, and in the rural areas down to the village level, we help them map out where their taxpayers were and what taxes they were reporting. The other is, they wanted to know which neighborhoods have what type of income profile and population density, geodemographics. And we have this for hundreds of cities. Mapid has built this kind of data set over the last 25 years through n number of methods. So we help give them a geodemographic profile of each neighborhood across the country. Now see the interesting thing. You are looking at a, let's say, a rich neighborhood. You are seeing one taxpayer in one house declaring a large income, let's say 1 crore per year. You are seeing his exact neighbor declare only 5 lakh income. These are things that can raise a flag. It's called Project Insight. It's in the public domain. And that's what the tax department has used. Okay, it should be digital, faceless, and all of that. But this helps them analyze where they can get more tax. So that's one very, very clear example of how an organization is looking to make more money. Let's look at the other side. You want to analyze where demand is, and you want to shape your supply so that it exactly meets the demand. So again, if you're a car company, you would like to know where demand is coming from. So test drive inquiries, you'd like to mark them on the map. Second, you'd like to see where your competition is. So you'd like to see where the competing dealers are, where your current dealer network is, what are your dealers' customers. So, as you start geocoding everything, you can start analyzing it geospatially to figure out, oh my gosh, I have demand here, but I don't have supply here. My competitor has it here. So I must kind of have a presence there. In the case of banks with ATMs, each ATM maybe costs them 1 crore of rupees. So they need to figure out what is the optimal level of ATMs, not over place it, because it all cannibalizes. So we actually have data of all the ATMs across the country, as well as which are the market areas, commercial areas, residential areas. So they can see where the population and demand could be, what the supply of ATMs could be, and they could rationalize their network using geospatial analytics. Similarly, let's look at real-time real-time analytics using geospatial. So, one of the ways you can save money or make money is basically make sure everybody in your supply chain is safe, or people are safe, because if you have a truck which is carrying your expensive goods, it has an accident. Not just is it loss of life, but it's also damaged goods and loss of income for somebody. So what we have done in the last 6 months during this corona pandemic is created the real-time geospatial maps, continuously updated, of the corona containment zones, testing centers, treatment centers, and isolation centers. So some of the large cement companies, especially when the districts were red, orange, green, yellow, and you were not allowed to go through the different districts, they have been real-time rerouting or replanning their routes, avoiding these corona black spots or dark spots. Similarly, if you are trying to solve for the emergency response use case, where you want ambulance to reach a destination within 1 hour so that the person can be treated, where should, and Uber is a very good example of this, where should your real-time supply of vehicles be so that it can meet demand immediately within a SLA? So that also is all geospatial analytics based on the real-time tracking data. So I hope that this gives you an overview of how geospatial analytics can be useful. The last thing on the experience I'll say, again, a bank example. If you are live monitoring or are able to give a hyper-personalized location-based information, such as to a consumer, saying that, you are here, we have a deal somewhere nearby, please walk in, you'll get it. These are the small things, location-based personalization, which can offer a better experience. Or if you are offering contactless delivery or contactless service, where somebody can say, I have an issue, and you can dispatch based on analytics the nearest service technician, and the consumer can see real time on maps that the technician is on its way, like an Uber. It gives such a wonderful experience to to the end user and makes them loyal to your brand. So I'll stop there. Hopefully this was useful and interesting.
Rohan, I think that was fascinating. The next time I'm looking for an ATM and it's out of cash and I don't know where to find it, I know who to call to ask where's the next one and how far away is it. I must say a few people might get rather worried about one of your clients who knows where they are and what the neighbor earns and what they earn and what they've spent on their credit card. Okay, but it just goes to show the power of geospatial analytics and where you have taken this. I think you do provide a enabler for so many businesses to become more efficient and to even create business models on top of the data and analytics that you provide. And certainly in the space of supply chain efficiencies, you show the way to how to be truly efficient, and in so many other spaces. So I think you brought a completely different dimension to this discussion, and also demonstrated. I don't think that government is behind. Government is also looking at growth in tax revenues and so on, and are willing to use the latest technologies to get there. So I think that was fascinating. What we will now do is we'll move to the next section of a little bit of a panel discussion. So I'd request all our panelists to come back again. Now, I'll again start off with, perhaps this time round, we'll start off with Kosturi, because Kosturi, you said that you would like to talk a little bit about what's happening in the space of healthcare. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jaydeep, again. Yes, I mean, in healthcare, I think everybody is, we use the word hyper nowadays, hypersensitive, hyper granular, hyper. So we are hypersensitive at this time with the COVID situation. And it is, even though even non-technologists today know how, digital intervention and especially data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning algorithms are getting used to expedite the clinical trials, the drug discoveries, and things like that. So yes, I mean, technology and statistical methods are being used heavily in the intelligent learning models. Not only the drug-related or genomic research, where you have to parse millions and millions and millions of records, but also in terms of patient data, claims data. So there is this situation in the healthcare industry, healthcare, life sciences, pharmaceutical industry, where we are seeing a lot of cross-pollination of data, which used to be existing in silos, now getting used together to come up with more, radical outcomes, I would say. And the outcome could be in terms of drug, it could be in terms of risk modeling, it can be in terms of predictive insights, even geolocation. I think one of the things that it's an interesting case study where in Wuhan, the first intimation came up from Canada, where they saw a number of outbreak of flus happening in a particular geolocation. And that is how, that the first intimation happened even before the announcement of COVID came out in December, last December, mid-December, the data analytics threw this data up. So one of the things that is happening is this accumulation of what is called electronic health records, EHRs. Earlier, the EHRs used to be always sitting either within the premises of a hospital, or sometimes the government collected those data. Now we see, without compromising, of course, on the security or the identity of the people, what is happening, this vast amount of data is being shared across geographies for research, for clinical research, and used for pattern recognition in terms of clinical studies. I am yet to see, I don't know in any other area, I mean, the panelists can comment on it, where this amount of data is being parsed, used, and collected to create outcomes. In hospital, in the healthcare system, as you know, there's a huge movement towards preventative cares, that is preventative care that is happening, where readmission into the hospital, or geriatric care, where old people are at home and cannot take care of. There's a lot of digital interventions happening, where combination of wearables, data collected from the wearables are giving predictions in terms of the health, the immediate health of the people, and being able to create awareness and or intervention right at the right time. In hospitals, starting from teleradiology, where whether it's an MRI or a CT scan or radiology, X-rays, there is a lot of first level intervention that is happening through machine learning and digital recognition of patterns, including cancer prevention, and then the interventions are being taken care of. Of course, there's a huge amount of human elements in it. But what I'm trying to say is that the healthcare is one of the areas where there is an increasing amount and need and demand for analytics that is happening. And this is not simple in terms of analytics. It is actually going to the last nth degree of the neural network technologies, using almost everything that is possible and feasible so far that is being used in the healthcare segment. So that's something that I wanted to address. I mean, from accelerating drug discovery to clinical trials to intervention to risk mapping to using the enormous amount of health data that we have from EHRs for future drug discoveries or future path of diagnostics. So all of that is being used heavily in healthcare.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
What is the context in India? Can you hear? Yeah. What is the
A bit of your voice is breaking up.
What is the context in India?
What is the context in India? In India also, there is a lot.
For so many years,
Yes.
we are not used to carrying our own file, our own medical file, pieces of paper in a file. And when we go to a doctor, we take it along, and the doctor or the hospital keeps nothing, right? So every episode is a fresh episode. Now we are moving from that to a context where the hospital has all your data, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
the insurance company. The insurance company will have all your data, right?
Right.
Now, so where are we right now in this journey in India in terms of patient records? And then I'll ask Gautam a question around this as to what are the data privacy norms around all of this and data protection for individuals.
Right. So India is also progressing. If you look at your tier 1, tier 2 level hospitals, and even I would go as far. I'm leaving apart the smaller nursing home types, clinics, polyclinics. I'm leaving those. But most hospitals today has a hospital management system. The hospital management system comes with the EMR, or electronic medical record database. That database globally today is extremely regulated through HIPAA compliances. The security part, the data security part, which you talked about, is HL7 compliance. So it is exceptionally regulated. So whoever is building those systems has to comply to those. Let me qualify that statement. There are still homegrown solutions which may or may not comply. But at the end of the day, when insurance companies slowly and you're absolutely right, Radipta, the way it is going, it is getting streamlined. So very soon, like already now, the insurance companies would kind of ask for certain data which are very compliant to either HIPAA, or there is something called an ICD-10 coding, which is a particular way of mapping a symptom to a disease, and there is a global database of this which has to be mapped. So the electronic medical record, say for instance you are a patient of a particular A hospital, your record is not only tracked with all your statistics, your gender, your age, your historical whatever you have in terms of whether you are a diabetic or not, but it also will carry the new prescription or the medicine that the doctor prescribed in terms of whether it is ICD-10 compliant or not. So these are becoming almost mandated, and as you can see, the dimension of the data is kind of burgeoning. And this is good and bad. Good in the sense that now you're sitting off a gold mine of data which can be used and processed for n number of either drug discovery, correlation, disease correlation, and several other things that can be done in terms of the healthcare industry. In terms of the data protection, as I said, there is a particular again there is a standard called HL7. So basically, the identity of the patient is masked. So there is no fear. But so if the data has to be used by third-party agencies, either for insurance companies to kind of design a portfolio of services that is targeted towards segmenting their insurance portfolio, or their insurance packaging, or their insurance pricing, or their claim adjustments, or claim denial process, all of these are now being data driven and AI driven because this information is there. Similarly, I mean, for even treatments, because today we can correlate through AI and data processing, which erstwhile was not possible, with millions of records of symptoms vis-a-vis the permutation and combination of tagging a disease to that particular symptom or those combinations of symptoms. Erstwhile, it was impossible to actually create another database of preemptive or preventative disease patterns. So now coming back to your question on India, most of the tier 1 hospitals has EMRs and EHRs. However, whether all of them are HIPAA compliant and HL7 compliant or ICD-10 coding is happening or not, possibly not, but it is getting there. The insurance companies are more and more demanding such compliances, and so are the governments. And the records are portable. For instance, if you have to move from one hospital to the other, technically speaking, your record is there in a form of EHR with an identifier, and it can be moved. So that is the status at this time.
Okay. So I'll ask Gautam about the whole subject of standards that are followed or not followed, or certification standards, security around all of this, including, as I was saying, that today there are so many people who claim to be data scientists. Are there some standards around that?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Jodhipda. And I think it's really interesting insight that we got from Kasturi onto the healthcare side of it. And so I will start from the healthcare side, Jodhipda, and then try to get into the data ethics part and then the standards quickly. Preventive healthcare, like what she mentioned, is of prime importance, especially for states which sponsor healthcare. So one is Canada, where it's 100% sponsored with the state, and the other example is NHS in UK, which is almost 60 to 70% sponsored. Now, because these two states actually sponsor healthcare to that to the large extent, so the preventive healthcare has become so important that there is a huge allocation of fund from the European Union called as Horizon 2020. So Horizon 2020 was formed, with a lot of aspects in keeping in mind, and one of the biggest chunk of the allocation of the fund, it was almost close to $20 billion, only allocated to the preventive healthcare. Now, because of the Brexit that's happening for the last 1.5 years of time, so UK is in a jeopardy now. But then, most of the focus from the funds which Britain got from Horizon 2020 was focused onto the preventive thing, because that's very important. They didn't want patients beyond the age to come to the hospital because they were getting clogged. Okay. So to free up the resources of the NHS facilities, there were a couple of initiatives out there. Right now, the funds from Horizon 2020 has stopped. We as a company, we also were involved in one of those initiatives. So that's very relevant here. Now, with that comes one point what we were discussing, that the electronic medical records and access of the record to the insurance company. Now, there lies a conflict, and that's where, while the GDPR has come, GDPR certification has not yet started. So first they said that by end of 2019 they plan to start. Then there's a hold on it till 2020. So I'm part of organization called as BVDA, Big Data BDVA, Big Data Value Association, the biggest data scientist association in Europe. And the problem is basically the data ethics part on this part. So while on one hand, there's a big positive that we have got this medical records which are transferable now. One need not carry the file. It can, with a unique identity number, you can access it. The problem is with the insurance sector. While in insurance sector will get a lot of benefits, the problem is that there are certain sensitive sectors where governments are not so free to allow them to get this data, because what happens is that based on certain symptoms, the insurance agencies can basically hike either the premiums or restrict coverage of certain symptoms, for different groups of people, right? And certain governments are not free to do that. So there's always a pros and cons, both sides of the coin, and that's where the data ethics come. It's not about the breach of data privacy. So maybe few things are as of now legal, but the ethics part is coming and saying that, okay, because of the data ethics, we will allow you to do that and we will not allow you to do that. So certain aggregate data is okay to get, while in, as already Kasturi pointed out. So the individual identity will not be revealed, but insurance companies are actually very eager to get the individual data, which would help them to stratify it and do it. But there are certain restrictions, and we are actually discussing those things. And I think within next 1 to 2 years of time, I think this thing will get resolved. But there will be variances from country to country, depending on what kind of autonomy governments are willing to give. One of the data protection bill is actually there in the parliament now from Niti Aayog. It's an equivalent of the GDPR of what they have done. So it is not yet approved. So we'll wait for it. There's a draft which is available, but that's on the government. This thing. It's not the full bill, but a summary. Coming back to the standards, I think there's a need for standard because of certain things that already you pointed out. Others called upon, saying that while there's a lot of opportunity and promise, there's also some standards that need to be done. There are two parts. One is the readiness of the companies, the incumbent organizations, which would like to embark onto the journey of data analytics. What is the readiness, why the failures are happening, where we can prevent it, how to make it more smooth, phase wise. So that's the organizational readiness part. And the other part is the other part of AI aspects, like life cycle and the risks, right? So there are two parts. So first, on the organizational readiness, so we are actually working on a standard now under ISO. The index number has already come. It's called as 24668. We hope this standard to be released by the end of coming year 2021. Each standard under ISO takes around 3 to 4 years of time to come out. That's a time frame. So we started work on it early 2015. It got a formal a balloting done in 2018 month of July. We got overwhelming response of out of 34 countries, 17 countries actually said that they are eager to contribute towards this standard. The important part is that it is actually led by India. So I think I'm happy to call this out, that in the last 40 years of Indian IT history, while we have become the largest workforce in the world onto IT and IT enabled services, India has never taken a lead on defining standards. So we were always happy in hanging those certificates either from Carnegie Mellon or ISO or whoever it may be, CMMI, ESCM, and so many. But this is the first time that India is leading the standard onto the artificial intelligence big data analytics for the subcommittee 42, which is for AI. This is actually for the organizational readiness, wherein we are stratifying it into different aspects of stakeholder engagement, data management, technology integration, analytics, AI development practices, methodology, lifecycle, those things. And it will be actually kind of a management assessment standard. So you'll have capability levels for each of these process categories, as well as you will have an organizational maturity from an organization standpoint. That's one part. Coming to the part B, which is AI aspect, we are working on two other standards. One is on the AI lifecycle, because we believe that the AI lifecycle may not be pretty close or similar in activities and spirit to that of an IT development. So on AI lifecycle, there is a big work that's going on. So there also, India has participated. I am not the chair or the editor of that standard, but someone else, is there. He's from Bangalore. He works for ABB. So that's a proud thing for us. And the third, standard is something that we are working on. I'm again leading that standard. That is on the risk. So as we were discussing, saying that there is an inherent risk of data bias, depending on when I'm building the model, what kind of data I'm taking, the constraints of the data. One of the biggest example of a failure for data bias was a Nikon camera. So there was a particular model that was released, saying that eye blinking, feature. That means when you take the picture with that, DSLR camera, so many a times, you will see that the picture comes wherein the eyes are closed, right? Because you have a speed of 1 by 2000, 1 by 500. So it's, 1 part by 500 parts of 1 second. So, there was a software AI algorithm which prevented that. And when they trained this, they trained that at, they did the R&D at US. And when they released that camera in Japan, it was a major flop, and they had to recall more than 5,000 cameras because the training was done mostly by Caucasians. And when it came to the Asian eyes, they were much more slimmer and thinner. So, it failed. So that's a classic example of a data bias, right? So, there's a risk on that. Then there's a, transparency and explainability that comes whenever you get into a neural network or so-called pure play, deep learning AI algorithm, because explainability comes down as you increase your dimensions, right? And then there's a decision oversight, wherein there are false positive, there are false negatives. And we are seeing that even in COVID, we have debates on the TV channels out there across the world. So there, where, which are the boundaries, where you need to intervene with decision oversight. So whether it's 3 tests, odd number of tests, and then you do that. Initially, India was doing it, then it stopped. So, you have to define the boundaries. And then there is basically the over reliability part. So we are working on a standard which will take into consideration these aspects, and one can assess a model, which one develops. There's a validity part also we are working on, saying that the vendor or the company which has developed this can assess the model against these parameters. The user or the recipient who is using it can also cross validate that. And we have built a AI model actually to differentiate the weightages of these factors depending on the cross section of the vertical and the domain that the model is built upon. So we are working on that. We have even filed a patent on that, and we are working with some European counterparts, as part of this, standard. So these are the 3 broad-based standards or frameworks that we are working on. And then the biggest thing that I will say that this time India is leading it. So India is part of it. India is leading it. So I think that's the brightest thing. The most positive thing. That's very encouraging.
Gautam, thanks for sharing with us. Very well kept secret that India is leading this the standard, which is something certainly to be proud of, and we are proud of you that you are at the forefront of this. Just one question: you talked about organizational preparedness. Can you give us 1 or 2 examples of what kind of preparedness an organization requires?
Yeah, so we have created these process categories for the 24668 standard that we are preparing. There are 5 stages, working draft, committee draft, DIS and FDIS, drafting standard and final drafting standard. We're in the WD now and moving into CD now. So we have given 5 process categories, Rajibda. So we have got stakeholder engagement, we have got data management, we have got competency development, we have got analytics practices. These are the 5 process categories we are saying. Each process categories has got different processes, so we are taking into consideration 19 processes under each of these process categories. And then each of these processes will have basically the base practices. So, and then these base practices will have individual information products. So, based on these dimensions, what we aim is basically that we give this framework to the companies, the incumbent companies, like say for example any steel manufacturing company, maybe any kind of hospitality sector, any kind of restaurant sector or tourism sector. So any of the incumbent organization who wants to embark onto the journey of big data analytics AI will get this framework, so they understand that which all aspects to look into it, starting from data, technology integration, stakeholder engagement, analytics practices, and then try to see that gauge that where they are in terms of their capability and maturity, what are the gaps and what are the opportunities, and based on that they will get a roadmap of how to basically start the journey. So you may not be right now. So take for example Indian Railways. So Indian Railways, at one point in time they floated a tender in 2017 16 I believe, to basically say that, oh, okay, I mean, we will give you particular routes all the data in terms of waitlisted passengers from point A to point B, the RAC confirmations, last minute cancellations, and final departure status. And you try to figure out that how do you actually manage this in terms of the break journey options. Okay, so if someone is not getting the direct ticket, so how can we build a system which uses analytics and AI to offer break journey things. The point is that that will never work because the operational efficiency maturity is so low at that point in time that even if by very high level of routing optimization algorithm, I do a model on that and give it to them, and I have a break journey. The point is that I'm from actually UP. Okay, so almost every year I touch Mughal Sarai. So in my, I'm, right at this point in time, I'm 46 years of age, and maybe, from 6 years of age, if I can recall my memory, I have traveled whatever, 40, 80 times. So reaching Mughal Sarai, departing. So I have never either reached Mughal Sarai on time, neither I have caught the train from Mughal Sarai on time. So if I now give a break journey option, deploying a very high level of complicated AI algorithm, in spite of the scientists being of the highest caliber, it's never going to work because the maturity is not there in terms of operational efficiency. So if Indian Railways take this framework and tries to gauge its, opportunities and gaps onto these facets, it will understand the roadmap saying that, okay, I need to deploy operational analytics in the first place to come to a level of maturity, and then maybe, embark onto this particular project, which will not be then on hold or, be halted or, abandoned later on, and save money and effort. So, and that is what we want to do. And this is happening for many organizations. Because of the hype, they are saying that, okay, we will do this, do that. They are, deploying money, resources, time, effort. And then, many projects are failing because you need a certain glide path, phase wise, so that you embark onto it. We are not saying you do not, but there should be a method behind the madness. And this framework, hopefully will help that achieve.
Okay, so clearly you cannot just have a digital model. The physical model has to keep pace with the digital model for it to work, right?
Yes.
And do you expect, I'll ask you one more question on this, I'm sorry. Do you expect that companies will have to undergo a lot of learning and development to be effective with big data?
I think to an extent, yes, Radhika. Things are already happening. The awareness is already happening, but I believe that it has to be a bit more structured. And if there is basically a framework which helps them, to go through the learning process themselves, including the parameters which are critical and how can they actually assess them. That's going to expedite the entire process. So I think yes.
Thank you so much, Gautam. I'd like to ask Rohan a question. These on these roads, we have toll roads particularly. They have these toll booths, and then you have traffic jams. Are you offering a solution around that? Do you see anything coming where through your that's no longer required?
No, absolutely. I think this is a big, hot button topic happening in the country around basically two things: making logistics efficient, so making moving people and goods like faster, cheaper, safer across the highways. And the toll booths are typically very big bottlenecks. And the second is around road safety in general. So let me cover the first one. So fastags, I mean, putting the GST and e-way bill in process has been a good kind of de-bottleneck for these toll booths in theory. And then this FASTag has been another good initiative the government has taken, wherein there's this RFID reader that you can pass through, and it can kind of auto debit your this thing. You don't have to wait to pay cash and get change, etc. I think the next big phase will be GPS based e-tolling. So, and actually, it actually brings in this whole element of pay per use. So, how many kilometers you have driven, you can pay by that. You don't have to pay for the full toll road. Supposing you exit part way off the highway. So there, actually, what happens is even the RFID per se is not so much needed, because it all happens in the cloud. That your vehicle has a GPS, and they are seeing. So what we do is, App India has the toll booths mapped, thousands of them across the country. So as you cross these locations, we geofence. So we kind of like say that, okay, you just crossed this toll booth, the fare will be whatever, X rupees per kilometer. And as you travel, the moment you get off the highway, so we geofence the highway as well. The moment you get off that, we calculate kind of the route and the distance that you traveled. And we tell that to the government, it auto debits from your wallet, your FASTag wallet, whether through UPI or other ways. So that is going to really help in terms of creating efficiency. There's a lot of talk around creating green corridors and so on and so forth to really kind of de-bottleneck the toll booths from that perspective. And the second thing is around safety, basically monitoring and continuously knowing the road design or road conditions issues. We actually have this today where in our navigation we tell the driver not just what the traffic is, but also that, be careful that there's a pothole ahead, a speed breaker ahead, a fallen tree ahead, or an accident ahead. And people can also report this. So using sensors, we are able to kind of do this real-time estimation, and then crowdsourcing and moderating the crowdsourced reports, we're able to kind of create this good mix of safety information. And what that does is that helps minimize accidents, which will help minimize bottlenecks, because accident also kind of creates bottlenecks. So hopefully we're seeing a big push that 14% of GDP of India is the logistics cost. Let it go down to 9%, which is kind of what developed countries are at. That's a 10 lakh crore plus saving for the economy. It benefits all.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge opportunity for the country, because if you just imagine the supply chain speeds can increase, the order fulfillment ability can improve, and the sheer inventory that every company is carrying can go down if you are more efficient. So there's a lot of savings there, and that could probably have an effect on the GDP of the nation, not just on the performance of individual companies. So I think that's a big opportunity. Coming to Dhruvo, I believe, Dhruvo, you are working on, you don't only do corporate data, but you also do health data, and COVID data is something that you have been studying. So would you care to share your insight?
Okay, so yeah, as a part of what we do, we are kind of creating these prediction models on what should be the number of cases in India, right? And accordingly, there are a lot of downstream use cases when, let's say, the vaccine comes, or what Rohan was talking about, which are the containment zones. How government need to take care of that. So our idea is to use these pandemic models which are there, and some of the pandemic model which exists is called SIR models, right? Where we are trying to understand what is the susceptible population, how many are exposed, what is the infection rate or the probability of infection on a particular. We are India has change of cases. India, directly correlated to an increase in number of cases. Is testing one of the reasons that the number of cases is going up, right? Where we generate estimation of the number of cases with the
What is the 45-day outlook for India? Or is that still under development? You don't have to answer all the questions I ask.
and make news channel which we are doing, so that's not, it's public, it's not anything we cannot. There
We have a question that has come in from Joydeep Ghosh of Deloitte. Is it only due to operational efficiency or physical infrastructure constraints that AI/ML algorithms fail in the Indian context? Is it that we, corporates and government, just don't know our country well enough in most of its relevant details to be able to train an algorithm? For example, an AI/ML based mutual fund launched earlier this year is underperforming the index even in a bull market. Would anyone like to take that on?
I can comment with my limited exposure onto this. So what happens is this. So if I want to forecast the sale of Kellogg's or sale of cornflakes, to be more generic, for a particular chain, say for example, Spencer's. Now what happens is that if I want to forecast sale of cornflakes for Spencer's in two different locations, one is at I'll take for example Bangalore as an example. So I basically take as Indranagar as one place, and then I take Majestic as another place. So Majestic is more commercial, it has got the railway stations and everything else, and Indranagar is more upscale, neighborhood, right? A residential place. I'm talking about at least 15 years back. Now everywhere it's commercial in Bangalore. So now if I want to basically forecast the same brand of Kellogg's for cornflakes for the same chain of Spencer's, my two algorithm models will be different because in Indranagar, most of the buying will happen during the weekends where people like you and me will go out on Friday evenings till Sunday morning to buy and store my stuff for the next 1 week or so. However, at a Majestic area, that's going to happen in a different way because most of the dealers will go there and buy in bulk with some discounts or something else so that they can go to the districts and out towns, outskirts, and then sell them in their shops, right? So the buying pattern over there will be actually on Monday and Tuesdays more than being on the weekends, right? And so on and so forth. I'm just calling out on one or two vectors out there. So what happens that moment you build an algorithm which is a little generic and you do not focus on the actual stuff, it's not going to work out, and that's why I hate to call out, but I'm still uh, out with all my guts that a product like a SAP HANA, which actually promised so much of analytics, actually is hardly being used for analytics anymore. Okay, those SAP could actually sell those licenses, but not because of there is a deficiency in the product. SAP HANA product is really good. We have evaluated them for a long time. They're good. The point is that the customization that needs to be done when you deploy SAP HANA for individual processes, if that is not enabled, these algorithms will not work. So anything generic in AI ML will not work because it's too sensitive to the covariates out there, and there has to be the knowledge of the developers or the data scientists, not only from an algorithm perspective but also from a process perspective to customize these algorithms. Otherwise it's not going to work. So that may be a little generic, but that is something, this kind of issues are cropping up in many places where there is a product or there is a generic algorithm which people claim that it's going to work, but we are not yet at that stage.
So then does it require a deep understanding of the underlying domain, the functional domain, or the business? You have to understand that business and its nuances very deeply to be able to train an algorithm. So it's not only something that you can leave to, you can't just buy and the application off the shelf. You have to have very deep knowledge. Is that so?
Yes, yes, it's a peculiar combination of knowing the algorithm. So the problem in today's day, Joydeep, is that most of the data scientists, like you said, that everyone calls out himself as a data scientist. If I know a bit of Python programming, if I can put a dot and call a package and pass some arguments and get some outcome, I think that I'm a data scientist. But I think it's not Python, it's not Julia, it's not Kotlin, it's not SAS. It's basically knowing the fundamental algorithms. So if I really know a simple algorithm like ANOVA, I can code that in a Java or a C++ as well. It really doesn't matter, right? Which language I'm using. So one is that fundamental knowledge of, what is the basic difference between even a median and a mean, right? So we all think that we know that, but, believe me, Joydeep, when I've, taken sessions, at, World Trade Center in Boston, when I was saying that, give me two examples of a use case, a practical business use case where median is not going to work, but mean is important, and vice versa. A very matured, apparently, audience couldn't give me a single right answer. So I think the fundamentals is pretty important on one side, and on the other side, what was called out, that one really needs to understand the process, because if you do not understand the process, algorithm can't help, even if you are the best data scientist in the world.
I think if I can add a bit, I think one of the big. Yes. Thank you, Jaydeep. I think one of the things we have, we've spoken for 1.5 hours and on the powers of data analytics and AI and ML. I think one of the things that fundamentally that has to be more matured. I mean, things have come a long way with neural networks, but the fundamental problem with predictability and the maturity of the algorithm, as you were just asking, what is required. One is algorithm. The biggest problem is the enormity of data that is required to, for the model to be trained in. What works on a 10,000 record might not work on a million. So that is I think one of the fundamental things that we struggle with is the rightness of the algorithm or the model that we are creating. There is one aspect is this enormity of the data that needs to be run through to be able to train the algorithm and to get the right train and test to get the right output and the right model. The other is that reinforcement learning. Do we do enough of that? I mean, it is that sequencing of trial and error. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gautam. That reinforcement learning is a key to getting that model out, the right kind of model out. And that is never done. I think one of the points you addressed in your previous segment is that the life cycle and IT development and SDLC life cycle is not the same as an AI life cycle. When people are trying to map that on an AI project and say that okay, it should take you 2 weeks or 4 weeks, it never happens. That's never going to happen. That is a wrong approach to an AI or a data analytics. It is very important, for the enormity of the data to exist to get you the right model, and the reinforcement learning to happen, that sequencing of trial and error to get you the right model. So if those things are not happening, then however good of a data scientist you are, you're still not going to get the right outcome.
I think that's a very good point that you made, Kosturi. The difference in the life cycle, you cannot apply the traditional SDLC life cycle. Okay. Are there any other questions from our audience? You can enter a question on the chat box.
Jaribda, the questions would be in the Hive, the other platform. We are just checking. If there's any question, we can pass it on. Otherwise, we can continue.
Yes, please. We are now open to our audience interaction.
Jaydeep, we have requested everyone to put in the questions. The questions we have not received as of yet.
Yeah, we'll give it another couple of minutes.
Okay. In meantime, maybe we can have the discussions going, and if there's any question, we'll pass it on to you.
Right. So I just go around the room and ask Dhruvo, would you like to make any more comments on the topic or ask any question to our fellow panelists?
It's good to learn from Gautam, Kasturi, and Rohan, right? Other than you, of course. Uh, I I think something which all of them talked about, and I believe actually is the fundamentals of everything is the data, right? As long as we don't get the quality of the data right, we are not going to do any kind of analytics which will make sense. So predominantly the quality of the management of data is perhaps becoming more important as we are starting to use analytics in our day-to-day life. Right? Whether we talk about, if we are talking about healthcare analytics, what actually at the end of the day matters, I believe, is what data you're basing your analytics on. And the second piece, which Gautam also touched upon, is the applicability of the analytics. Where which important of a data scientist who can do that perhaps. One question I had for Rohan, analytics, right? And we talked about the Arogya to analytics, fullest those kind of.
Okay, there's two parts to this. One is actually we have to be very careful about user privacy. I actually want to say that first before I get to the usefulness. In general, data privacy and using it ethically is quite important, including in geospatial. So, I mean, especially in geospatial, but why especially? It could be financial data, it could be your browsing habits. So, in general, I don't prescribe to the business models of some of the large companies which are around advertising and all of that, because there's a perverse incentive towards misusing data analytics for targeting users. I think Netflix has a very good documentary called Social Dilemma, talking about Facebook and Google and what kind of bad things they're doing using data and analytics. And so, why it was said that is because there was a lot of concern with regards to Arogya Setu around privacy of my medical information and my location and all of that. So, if people are quite upfront and clear that, look, we are not in this business of using it and we will use it, so then that would not have been an issue. It won't have blown out of proportion. Maybe they were worried that the government will become a surveillance state and all of that. Now, Arogya Setu, on the consumer side, on the user side, it has a very limited use case, I do believe. It has a very good use case that, if you get to know your safety status and all of that, and in case you have come in contact, but I'm not sure that they have used it to the full extent that they could have. You're absolutely right that, a lot of that data, I can change the status from green to yellow just by putting that self-assessment form. How useless that is. I mean, so what that means is that they had the right intent. I think they got overwhelmed by a lot of the pushback about the app, and they have maybe dumbed it down now. And so the utility has reduced. I know the intent in the background that they say, but it's not clear, it's not public, that they have used geospatial analytics to do spread tracking and all of that. But there is no such research paper or publication or open source information about what they really could achieve and not. I do believe, and look, we were not involved in that, but we were still real time mapping containment zones and testing centers and treatment centers and isolation centers. I think just that information visible through Arogya Setu to like 100 crore people would have been very, very useful, but they haven't put that. So, I mean, what they might have used it in the backend to track spread of it and predict it, that would be wonderful. I think these micro lockdowns and all of that could be data driven. Maybe they have done it, but it's not known exactly what work they have done. So I hopefully I give you some
Definitely.
Shumit, do we have media present?
I'll have to check Jaribda in the other platform because none of them are in this one.
I think this could be of media interest. Anyway, we have a question, which is from Shangomitra Ghosh of Data Core Systems. The question is, what is your opinion on industry standard auto MLs? Who would like to take that on?
Since she's from my organization, I'm not going to take this question.
It would be fun actually to watch you take it. Or would Gautam like to take it?
Gautam.
So, I mean, if I have understood the question correctly, unfortunately, the answer is disappointing. So there is no industry standard as of now, to keep it short. But I think, the expectation is that there should be one which will help everyone.
I'll further that question to you, Gautam. We have this debate internally all the time, whether to build our own algorithm or use the AutoML from, the Googles and all of these people. So what's your suggestion? I mean, from an expert point of view.
I somehow think that the moment you use the AutoML, and there are a lot of similar things like auto arena for forecasting. So as I said, the moment you use something which is auto, it will save a lot of upfront time initially to get a certain level of accuracy. But then to move that now up by even 5 point or 3 point becomes a real challenge, because now to interpret that, decode the code that someone has written, unless and until the documentation of the package is pretty well, it's very difficult. So that becomes a challenge. So but then on the other hand, if someone is releasing a package wherein the documentation is very good and it is understandable by a data scientist, then obviously there is no point reinventing the wheel. So you take something wherein it gives you certain level of accuracy, and then now fine tune that further. That's going to help. So so that would be my answer. But mostly what I've seen in generic, that may not be doing justice to many of the other algorithms, but mostly I've seen these AutoML or AutoAnima. I mean, these kind of packages. Business finally is not happy to get the kind of outcomes in terms of accuracy. That's my personal take.
Okay. Are there any other closing comments from any of the panelists?
I just want to really thank Kasuri, Rohan, and Dhruvo, because there's a lot to learn, and in this 1.5 hours itself, I think I have gained a lot of insights into a couple of other domains as well. So thank you. Thanks a lot to all the other panelists.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead, Rohan.
I also actually found it really interesting. Such great work everybody is doing, and it opened up my eyes to growth and analytics outside of my area of geospatial. So thank you for having me.
Okay. I would like to thank all of you on behalf of CII as well as myself for sharing your insights. It has been a learning experience for me, and I do believe I've made a new set of friends. So thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Shumit for his closing comments.
Thank you, Jaribda. Thank you for chairing the session, and thank you all the eminent panelists for spending so much of time and sharing such lovely perspectives. And we hope to see you again in the future ICT EAST also. And today is a special day. We must wish Kasturi a happy birthday.
Okay, happy birthday,
Happy
Guthrie.
birthday.
Happy
And for the participants, tomorrow again we are starting at 10. Tomorrow morning we would have with us Mr. Debashish Sen. And so I would request all the participants to kindly log in at least 10 minutes before the start by 9:50 in the morning. And before we close, we'd like to thank all the sponsors. The Department of Information and Technology and Electronics, Government of India, supported by Webel, STPI. We have Cisco as the technology sponsor, JIS Group as the gold sponsor, PwC as the technical sponsor, Capgemini, Minfi Technologies as the cloud sponsors, Cognizant Skill sponsor, Uber as the network sponsor, BMC Software as the digital innovation sponsor, Infinity as the associate sponsor, e-commerce sponsor is M-Junction, electronics sponsor is Distronics, cybersecurity skill sponsor is Indian School of Ethical Hacking. And I would like to give a special thanks to Business Prior for also supporting the cause. Thank you so much. Thank you all the sponsors. And we look forward to meeting tomorrow again at 10. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.